Now, a lot of that's happening because we're basically saying God's responsible for all of what our parents did. That's really what we're saying, isn't it? We're saying, oh, God isn't responsible because God does not have authority over how the parents use their soul. God's not responsible for that. God's only responsible for the laws that govern the soul, not how the parents use them. And so we're actually continuing to blame God for something that really doesn't even belong to God, it belongs to something else. And we do it, and the trouble is our heart remains open to the very persons who harmed us, while at the same time our heart remains closed to the very person who can help us. Very sad state, really, isn't it? Can you see the importance of recognising it? There's a lot involved in this discussion. Obviously, again, this is another discussion that we're just sort of barely scratching the surface of, right? But you can see the problems that arise. We can see, firstly, as we can see, and maybe I need to bring it to conclusion because we're over time now, but we can see that we're placing importance on the very things that God will assist us to destroy already because of God's laws allowing that, and we're placing no importance on the very things God has to wait for us to decide what to do before any help can be given. And then on top of that, we blame God for the very things that our parents have done, and we leave our heart open to the parents and we don't leave our heart open to God. And then we wonder why we're not feeling loved. Just because our hearts are closed towards the very person who can supply that love. Because we want to remain open to the other people who didn't. And we're not prepared to emotionally grieve the loss of a parent who loves us, really. We're not prepared to just grieve that and let it go. And then we could accept the real parent and accept how that real parent feels about us. The feelings that come from God are overwhelmingly beautiful when you let yourself feel them, right? But the majority of us do not let ourselves feel them. We don't. Because we want to remain open to getting love to the very people, getting love from the very people who did not love us. In other words, we are basically remaining open to our parents having authority over us. So this is the irony. We're rebelling against God's authority, thinking we're some kind of independent being. But the reality is we're giving away authority to the very people who misused it. I can't answer any more questions, Felix. Does that make sense to you? Can you see the problems? So can you see the choices we're making are very, they're really quite insidious in some ways, aren't they? In terms of stopping our development, stopping our growth, and badly influencing where we place our priorities and therefore where our desire lay. Right? You can see that if we understood completely what we were creating, and we would be going, look, fair enough, all of these things are physical. What I do physically doesn't really matter as much as what I do spiritually or what I do with love. What I do with love matters the most. Right? These are the permanent creations, positively and negatively, by the way. We could put in here a whole heap of positive things. So every single act of goodness that you engage adds to your soul, and it's there permanently because God doesn't want to destroy that. So you can actually do an act of goodness today, and in 1,000 years' time, people will still be benefiting on the earth from it. Because God doesn't want to destroy that. All God's laws support the existence of that act of goodness. Do you see that? So here's all the things that are out of harmony, love, and God wants to get rid of them. He's created a whole heap of laws to get rid of them, but you have to engage those laws to get rid of them. But God also has allowed you to create good things in this column, under the soul. Things where you act in harmony with love, act in harmony with pure desire, act in harmony with truth. Every act taken in that place will last forever. Literally. It'll last as long as your soul lasts, and if you receive some of God's love, you're immortal. That means you last forever. So that means that every act that you took in harmony with love will last forever. The effects of it will be felt forever. Yeah, that's a remarkable thing to think about. Instead of worrying about a painting, they just like and God destroys it in a year, in 10 years or 100 years' time. How about painting something in the soul and having it last forever? How about you become that kind of artist? That would be great, wouldn't it? And this is where we need to see our priorities and how God's authority is acting upon the system. So hopefully this discussion has expanded your mind a bit with regard to things, right? So when you first looked at the discussion in your outline, you probably thought, oh, authority, what did he put that in there for? What's going on there? And now hopefully you can see the importance of it and also how it affects your creations and what it means about what you create and what things will be naturally destroyed, things that you don't have to worry about as much if they're in or out of harmony with love, when compared with things that you do need to concern yourself quite seriously about, because these are creations that either last forever or, and even if they're bad creations, they will last until you destroy them, until you decide to do something about them. Now, there are mechanisms by which God has to help you destroy them, which is fortunate given the fact that many of these creations have ongoing effects into other lives and other people's existences that without God's help, we would never be able to raise the result. So it's very fortunate that God has allowed these laws, and you'll learn some of them tomorrow. But it's very fortunate God has done that, because if God didn't do that, imagine trying to destroy. Imagine you create a religion, like the Muslim faith. You create the Muslim faith, 600 or whatever it happened, 400, I can't remember the exact year that Muhammad, 600 something, what was it, 620 or something, yeah. I forget exact, but anyway, so you create the Muslim faith. It's got a whole lot of tenets that also seems to justify violence under certain conditions. By the way, a lot of what's in the Bible does exactly the same thing. So the Torah could be fit into this exact same thing. So Moses, who actually assisted through spirit inspiration the creation of the Torah, which also has exactly the same principles that many of the Muslim principles contain, right? Both those people, imagine, years later, people are still acting in harmony with eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Imagine how many people have died acting in harmony with these principles, right? Now, you're now in the spirit world. How are you going to correct all that? You can't. Unless you engage something that God has authority over, which is some of God's principles we'll learn tomorrow, you will not be able to negate the effect of what you created. It'd be a disaster. Your soul would remain in terrible condition for long periods of time unless there was some process that you could engage that reverses this, right? And this is why it's so important to see, firstly, don't create what you can't destroy is a good principle to remember, isn't it? Don't create what is so difficult to destroy that takes years and years to destroy. And remember, everything in your soul that's out of harmony with love takes a lot longer to destroy than these things, because they have effects on other people that then might take years and years and years to destroy. Friends of mine 2,000 years ago involved in certain behaviour, and there's still people in the hells today that are acting the way they're acting because of the effects of what those friends decided to do. Now, if God did not have the mechanisms we learn tomorrow, that would be those people who are my friends would still be in the hells today. So fortunately, God's created some mechanisms for us to undo these things, but we need to understand this is what we have authority over. And God cannot help us with them unless we want that assistance.